Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Nikhilesh Jain. I basically head the Department of Critical Care Services in CHL Hospitals Indore. Over the course of next half an hour or so, what we're planning is a small deliberation, not meant to discuss hugely technical aspects of mechanical ventilation, but probably think about why, the whys, the where whys, and the hows in terms of what are the common questions that go in people's minds when they actually see that their patient has gone on a mechanical ventilation. So, in that vein, what is actually a ventilator? Well, a ventilator is a machine, simply put. What really happens is, ventilator, being a machine, is used whenever your loved one or the patient, in this case, is not able to breathe on his or her own vocation and they need support for breathing. What a ventilator does is it sort of takes over the breathing of a patient till the point in time the patients are able to do that, and once they are able to do that, they are gradually weaned off the same. By weaning, what I mean is that slowly taking them off the ventilator in a graded fashion so as to assess and see how this would be going. Can I have some questions on this? Okay. Then usual thing is that a lot of people ask this question, that why does my patient need a ventilator if you think that the patient could be doing well without a ventilator? There are certain occasions, there are certain instances that we talk about. One is when the patient is having a lot of respiratory distress. Respiratory distress meaning patient is having a very labored breathing, very fast breathing. Patient is having a drop in oxygen saturations, and when we are able to actually see that they are struggling to breathe, this is the point in time wherein giving them ventilatory support would help them. On top of that, there are certain neurological diseases in whom the patient's sensorium or the level of consciousness is so far down or so far gone that their breathing is not meaningful. When I say it is not meaningful, what I mean is that they are not able to cough out their secretions on their own, which means that they would end up taking their saliva and all the other secretions into their lungs, leading to some sort of a bad pneumonia. One. Secondly, they would have an obstruction which is caused by the tongue, which would actually mean that they would not be able to breathe effectively. Now, this is another situation which warrants taking them on a mechanical ventilator. Thirdly, whenever you see certain patients developing neuromuscular respiratory failure. When I say neuromuscular respiratory failure, what do I mean? This could be a patient who has a very high, say maybe somewhere in the neck, cervical spinal cord injury, or the patients may develop some muscular weakness disorders such as something that we call as Guillain-Barré syndrome or something that we call as myasthenia gravis. Not very common, but they are seen in clinical practice. And once these are noted, then we would be taking up these patients on mechanical ventilation just so that their breathing can be supported on this. Now, there's a question coming up that Mrs. Humaira has asked it. वेंटिलेटर का क्या रिस्क है डॉक्टर? ओके, सो जब हम बात करते हैं कि वेंटिलेटर की रिस्क क्या है, लेट्स लुक एट इट दिस वे. कोई भी पेशेंट जो वेंटिलेटर पे लंबे समय तक रहता है उसमें इन्फेक्शन यानी संक्रमण होने की संभावना रहती है, और उसके चलते जो है ऐसी स्थिति बनती है कि कई बार इन पेशेंट्स का वेंटिलेटर पर स्टे यानी वेंटिलेटर पर रहने का समय वो ज़्यादा लंबा हो जाता है. कई बार इनको एंटीबायोटिक्स की ज़रूरत पड़ती है, और ये सारे मरीज़ चूँकि आईसीयू में लंबे समय तक रहते हैं, इसलिए इनको जो संक्रमण होते हैं या जो इन्फेक्शंस होते हैं वो ज़्यादा रेजिस्टेंट टाइप के होते हैं. फिर एक और सवाल आया है कि स्पर्श ने पूछा है, वेंटिलेटर इज़ एन एक्सपेंसिव सर्विस बाय द हॉस्पिटल्स. I won't say very expensive if you look at it in terms of the sort of way in which the life is saved. But look at it this way, that yes, ventilator machine itself, the costs are huge. Then the running costs are huge because oxygen charges, because the AMC charges, and the paraphernalia of using the tubings, which are meant to be discarded after every use, they all cost. And on that cost, GST also gets added. Healthcare comes under GST. So when we put everything put together, yes, it is not a cheaper proposition. It is expensive. So we cannot say that it is a cheap thing to be done. But when it is required, and it is life-saving in those situations. Then Vineet has asked a question: how often can I get updates about my loved one's condition? Well, most of the ICUs in the world, whenever we talk about, the updates are mainly given by the intensivists or the ICU doctors. And most of the times the update is sort of given at least once in a day. It can be more, but at least once in a day. Most of the times it gets converted to 2 times a day, depending on how the patient's condition is. If the patient is having a catastrophic event, if the patient is having a bad event, then the frequency of this may be much more. Now Hamza has asked me a question: should a person buy a personal ventilator for COVID-19 treatment and safety? Hamza, it's a very preemptive question. I'll put it that way. I mean, we can even construct ICUs inside private homes and everything, but I don't think that they serve a purpose. Simply buying a ventilator is not enough. You need the know-how to how to run and operate a ventilator. You need a man behind that machine to actually understand what that machine is doing to your patient. Unless that is sorted out, it will not be possible to effectively ventilate a patient. Now, is there any lung damage due to ventilator? Okay. Let me put it slightly differently. Ventilators are usually very good for saving lives, and at the same point in time, there's a technical aspect to it which talks about using certain amount of pressures. This could be end expiratory pressure called as PEEP, which is what we refer it to, and there's something called as tidal volume, that is meant to be the sort of volume which we give to the lungs by a ventilator artificially. Now both of these, if they are more or less depending on the situations, they can give rise to certain amount of harm in the lungs. And that is why, as I told you earlier, you need the man behind the machine to actually know how your patient is getting ventilated. If you're subjecting your patient to a ventilator, please go ahead and do it in a unit which is manned by intensivists, which is actually run by intensivists, and hopefully your patients would do better on those units as compared to others. So now Palak has asked a question: who needs ventilator? I covered that sort of in the earlier part of my discussion, but it's basically, simply put, all those patients who cannot breathe properly. It could be not breathing properly because of pneumonias. It could be not being able to breathe properly because of neuromuscular respiratory failures. It could be not breathing properly because of a neurological condition, or it can be because some sort of accident or trauma has happened, because of which they are having injuries. So all these factors can be contributory, and all these are patients who would actually require a ventilator. To add to that, there would be certain patients who would be undergoing general anesthesia for major surgeries. They are also the type of patients who would require it. So Soumya has asked what to expect when your loved one is ready to be taken off from a ventilator. Well, most of these patients are sedated. So some of these patients may not have a good enough recall of the time when they were on ventilator. So that is expected. Plus, some of these patients may have some amount of soreness in the throat because of the endotracheal tube, which is used to deliver ventilation through a ventilator. It's basically a conduit like a tube, and through that only, that goes into the breathing space and delivers it. Okay, Aarti has asked me a question. This is besides the topic, is it possible that antigen and RT-PCR report are negative and just CT scan show? So is it the patient is COVID positive or not? Aarti, actually this is not a question meant for this meeting, but what I would do is that I would still say that for any form of patient to be labeled as COVID positive, you need either an antigen positive test or an RT-PCR test. Simply labeling it in the form of CT may not be enough, because the CT findings can be as a differential for a lot of other patients as well. So I'll leave that question at that. Next is by Varun. Are there any options or substitutes for ventilators? Well, sometimes for intermediate support, we use something like a mask-like machine, which we call as a non-invasive ventilation or BiPAP machine. Sometimes patients do well on that, but even on them, we should be able to judge. Again, as I say, the man behind the machine becomes the important. you should be able to judge which are certain of these patients who are not going to do well on that, and they need to be changed over to a invasive mechanical ventilation. Dheeraj has asked me a question: how many times a doctor checkup is required when a person is on a ventilator? Well, ideally, it's a teamwork. Whenever we talk about ICUs, you have to have an intensivist, you have to have nurses which are trained for this. And when we talk in terms of monitoring, a ventilated patient is something like a 24-hour job. You know which parameters are good, you know which parameters are bad. Sometimes they need monitoring, sometimes they need intervention, and all of these need to be interpreted in the context of the entire patient about how exactly that patient needs the best form of ventilation. So it is planned accordingly. Okay. Shikhar has again asked a question which is probably somewhere in the same lines. What is the basic use of ventilator? Now, basic use of a ventilator is to give breath. Simply put, a machine which is meant there to be given breath and support a patient. Sanjeev has asked, is there any life-saving machine other than ventilator? But I'm not aware. I would say anything that gives you breath. If you don't breathe, you die. It's as simple as that. So there's nothing more important than a ventilator whenever it is required. If it is not required, fine. There are so many other things. Simultaneous ventilation of multiple patients. Okay. This is a technical question, but having said that, it has been found that there is not enough evidence in medical literature to suggest that different patients' lungs are similar. So when the lungs are dissimilar, a similar type of ventilatory strategy for COVID-19 patients cannot be used uniformly, and there is no data in the literature to prove that this sort of thing works effectively. So as of now, probably no. Okay. Again, Soumya has asked, what to expect when going home on a ventilator? Okay. You can expect a certain amount of psychological turmoil for patients who are conscious, because certain times we keep patients sedated, and certain times if the patients are cooperative, then we keep them awake. And this is something that psychological support is what they need. Psychological trauma happens because they know that they are dependent on a ventilator. They would need a lot of nursing care, and they know this feeling that they are dependent on others on those times. They need a feeding tube so that they can be fed, because with a tube in situ, it would be difficult for them to feed on their own. So these are some of the broad things that you would need to know. I'm not going to go into a detailed tutorial sort of a thing in this. Okay, now Shivani has asked, does putting a patient on ventilator the last option available? Well, I would say if I have to use my ventilator, I'd prefer to use it much more earlier when I can save a life. It's not meant to be done when I won't say it's not meant to be done. It still saves the life. But having said that, do not keep a life-saving strategy till the last, because then it may not give you the sort of benefit we are looking at. So that's a problem. Now, what sort of recovery should I expect? This is a question from Vineet. Vineet, some amount of muscle weakness may happen, but most of the times the recovery would be complete if the patient's pathology or the patient's disease is taken care of, and they would need some amount of physiotherapy to come out of this. After that, they are absolutely normal, most of these patients. Varun has asked, what are 3 major things that a family member should know when their loved ones are on a ventilator? Okay, that's a good question. They need to know certain things, such as their patient would not be able to take food while on ventilator, because there's a tube that interferes with the swallowing. So it's better for these patients to be on tube feedings, either through the nose, or sometimes we surgically or artificially create another tube in the stomach, which is called as a PEG tube. And another 2 major things would be your patient may need some amount of sedation or some amount of sleeping drugs so that they are effectively ventilated, because most of the times conscious patients do not coordinate with the ventilator in a good enough fashion. Thirdly, I'm telling you this because it's a very common perception that once a patient is taken on a ventilator, most of these patients are probably on their deathbed. They are critical, yes, that I would grant to you, and that's what is expected. But to say that none of these patients come out of ventilator, or probably putting the patient on a ventilator is equivalent to, say that these patients are going to die is not correct. A lot of patients have been successfully from the ventilator. A lot of patients do well. And actually, we've been able to save a lot of lives because of this life-saving strategy. Shekhar has asked, what is a breathing tube, right? Breathing tube is either an endotracheal tube or a tracheostomy tube, and it's a small tube which goes into your airway, or what we call as trachea, your breathing pipe. Put it more crudely, the breathing pipe connects to your lungs, and that's how we are able to ventilate a patient. Now, this question is a repetition by Asim. Why a ventilator might be needed? So I'll again go through the same indications. It's basically because your loved one cannot breathe, and that is why we need it. It could be either because of a bad pneumonia, which is causing him a lot of difficulty in breathing. It could be a lot of desaturation happening secondary to a neuromuscular respiratory failure, or a bad stroke which might have happened, or for that matter, a patient who has undergone elective major surgery. Now all these are indications for putting these patients on ventilator. Okay, Palak has asked another question. Sir, क्या ventilator लगाने पे दर्द होता है? Okay, it's a valid question. And the thing is that basically when we put an endotracheal tube, if we leave the patient conscious at times, the patient is able to feel the discomfort. Just imagine, आप conscious हो और आपको एक tube डाल दी गई है. Or the problem that happens with that is you are able to feel that tube. So that is why we tend to sedate these patients slightly so that they are able to breathe better, so that they are more comfortable while they are being on ventilator. This also needs to be known to relatives, that their patients may tend to sleep more while they are on ventilator because they may be given sedation or some sedative agents so that some amount of sleep is induced and the patients remain comfortable. This is only to make your loved one comfortable. Uttam has asked, what is the role of multivitamin and additional nutritional supplements? Well, patients on long-term ventilatory support, they tend to develop muscle failures, and all these supplements help us in building it up. To say that we are able to build it up very nicely, or we are to say that we are able to, solely make a man strong based on that, is very, very difficult. That doesn't happen. So you require a full team of people, such as physiotherapists, such as the intensivists, such as the dietitian, and it's basically a whole amount of teamwork to make your patient better. And multivitamins and additional nutritional supplements are a part of that regimen. Okay. Now, a lot of people ask this question that, will my patient be able to come off the ventilator? Now, of course, nowadays the machine is so good, the people handling it are so good, that most of the patients do come off of the ventilator unless the disease process or the problem because of which that they went on ventilator is so severe that they cannot be salvaged. But most of them do. It's a life-saving invention, and I would put it this way, that he has it is something that probably is a part of modern medicine now anyhow. Varun has asked, if a ventilator is used on a COVID-19 person, can the same be used on a patient suffering with something else? Yes, it can be, provided you use adequate amount of filters and you use effective filtration processes for these ventilators. This is a normal process and it can be done. Meenu has asked, how effective is psychological assessment of a patient attendant when the patient is required to be put on ventilator? Ideally, it should be done, but because of timing constraints, because you are not able to always find a counselor in your team who is good and qualified enough to brief these patients on the implications of their patient being on a mechanical ventilation. A lot of brunt of explaining this falls on the doctor itself and the critical care team. So, but yes, it has to be done ideally, because they should be made to understand what really happens with their patient. Khushi has asked, for how many days a person can be kept on ventilator? Well, I would say as long as you want. Christopher Reeves, the older Superman, he is one prime example who was actually working with a ventilator. Then Hawkins, he's also been another example who has moved around with a ventilator and has been able to work successfully with that. So there's no limit to it. The machines are very good now. Aman has asked me, what is diffuse axonal injury and how is it treated? Well, let me put it differently. Putting it slightly crudely, diffuse axonal injury, again, it is not part of this particular discourse, but it's basically a component of traumatic brain injury, or what we call in common words as head injury. And what really happens in that is that there's a lot of soft tissue damage, a lot of soft tissue finer damage. It's like disturbing the inner circuitry of the brain. And different people get affected by it differently. Basically, it's all about supportive care. There's no definitive pharmacological therapy that does wonders in that, and there's no surgical therapy that would do wonders in that. So it's basically and primarily purely supportive. Now, when somebody says me that who is actually supposed to brief me about the ventilatory status of my patient, please choose a hospital which has got good intensivists, which has got a full-blown intensive care team, because they are the ones who will be primarily doing your briefing regarding that. Varun has asked again, requirement of respiratory therapies. Of course, chest physiotherapists, respiratory therapists form an integral part of any critical care unit which actually ventilates patients. So definitely yes, and they would require a lot of physiotherapy interventions as well to build up their strength, one, and to simultaneously help them come off the ventilator in a faster way. That is also there. Now, when we talk about it, there's a very relevant question that is asked that, doctor, I feel that my patient is terminal, and I don't think that this patient is going to survive, or I don't think it is good on my part to prolong my relatives or my loved ones' misery by keeping them on ventilator on a prolonged way. So why don't you disconnect it? Well, as of now, the Indian law recognizes death. Even as of now, the brain death recognition in India is fraught with a lot of legal issues. And when we talk in terms of an actual death, what the law legally accepts is a circulatory death. Circulatory death meaning the heart simply stops working, and what you get in layman terms is a flat line. So when that happens, of course, death is considered true and that continues. But what do you do when a patient is on ventilator? You know that this patient is not going to come off the ventilator, and the disease of the patient is such that it will not allow that particular individual to come out of the ventilator. So that becomes difficult. Well, as of now, there is no provision in Indian law to get a ventilator disconnected on their own. But yes, if such a thought process is concerned, de-escalation is one process that can be concerned regarding all the other support that can be considered. One, and secondly, if the patient is not on a ventilator, you can make a concerted effort, and probably if the patient is not in a capable condition to give consent, their near ones can give a consent that they don't want their patient to be kept on a ventilator. It's a matter of consent. Now, Dheeraj has asked, can COVID-19 be cured by keeping a patient on ventilator? Well, I wish it was so, because if that be the case, then we would have kept all our patients on COVID-19 on ventilator and they would have all gone home. But it isn't that way. A lot of other things go into it, such as the condition of the lung, such as the improvement in the condition of the lung, and how far are we able to bring down their oxygen requirements. If we are not able to do all those things, then despite the patient being on a ventilator, they don't do well, and at some point in time decompensate. Decompensate meaning they go down, their blood pressures go down, they go down, and eventually they die. So ventilator is not, I would again repeat, a ventilator is not the treatment. Ventilator is part of the treatment of respiratory failure, which happens secondary to COVID-19. Asim has asked, what are the eating habits of a person while they are on a ventilator? Well, Asim, because of the tube, they are not able to be cooperative when they are on a ventilator. So most of these patients would be on tube feeds. When I say tube feeds, it would be either a tube going through your nose into the stomach, that is one, or a tube that has been put surgically into the stomach, which is what we call as either a PEG tube or a feeding jejunostomy. We feed these patients through that. Actual solid food is very difficult to be taken into that, because the swallowing reflex actually gets impaired when we put these tubes for breathing purposes. So, are there any other questions on that? I'm assuming that most of the questions have been answered satisfactorily. Right. So we can end now. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you.